As you know, this complex consists of both the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. So together, we're the largest containerized gateway in the United States by far. And in 2021, both these ports moved 20 million containers. That's a record amount. In 2022, we moved 19. For a Long Beach perspective, that was a reduction of 2.7% for us. And of course, there's a lot of conversation here in the first quarter of 2023 regarding the loss of cargo, loss of volume. But to put it in the proper context, there's a reduction of import growth in the United States to begin with, all across the board. And obviously, we had a tremendous surge that resulted from the pandemic with regard to the heavy appetite that the consumer had ordering online, whether it was consumer products or durable products as it relates to business entities. Suffice to say that we had this record number of cargo that came into this complex. And a little more than a year ago, if you lived in Newport Beach or even further south, you realized that we had a port here because people were wondering, what are these vessels off our coast? We had about 109 vessels waiting to get in either to the Port of Long Beach or the Port of Los Angeles. So it was obviously national news to the point that the Biden administration, President Biden appointed a White House envoy to come to this complex and have weekly discussions. And at one point early on, it was like 3 days a week to see how we could get everybody together to address the congestion and bottlenecks. So suffice to say, I think most of you here know about the ports and the Port of Long Beach. And I think we're also here to talk about energy, environmental sustainability. And what is the plan for us to slowly redeem ourselves or refrain from the petrol product? And it's going to be a long time. I mean, to be honest, we're not going to wean ourselves from fossil fuel anytime soon. But I think California is leading the way in terms of how we do that in a more expedited manner. And of course, the plan of action for California is to focus on 100% renewable energy as at the federal level with the Biden administration. So California is doing their part to set the goal for 5 gigawatt dependency on renewable energy, specifically wind, by 2030, by 2045, get to the 25 gigawatt goal. So let me say a little bit more about the port. We have a climate adaptation planning study that we did some years ago to address everything from sea level, the drought-related issues, weather-related issues that impacted port operations. So suffice to say that it's been a number of years that Port of Long Beach have really looked to the future in terms of what is the energy demand given our move towards zero emission. So the answer to that question is the energy demand will quadruple here in terms of overall for the government, for the U.S. in terms of dependency on electricity. So needless to say that it doesn't matter what state you're talking about throughout the United States, the grid is rather antiquated. So for us to really address the issue to reduce our dependence on the grid, given the utility of that model, although there's a lot of investment going into it, but clearly renewable energy is the answer. So in that regard, if you go back to the resume that the Port of Long Beach has presented, back to 2005, Victor made reference to the Green Port policy. That policy, we were the first port in the nation to move forward with a substantive plan of action on how we would become a green port. The plan of action that we move forward to reduce emissions. Am I loud enough, or could people barely hear me? Hello?
Yep.
That better?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, John. This man here, overall you have a great panel, by the way, but I have learned so much from Jack with regard to the progress of how we really elevate the bar with regard to hydrogen, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So Jack, you're a man of many skill sets. So anyway, so for the Port of Long Beach, in 2005 we said we had a plan of action to reduce emissions. And then in 2006, we joined with the Port of Los Angeles in the form of the Cleaner Action Plan to jointly have a plan of action to reduce emissions. And I'm happy to report that we have made a lot of accomplishments. to the tune of reduction of particulate matter in the 90th percentile, SOx a 97% reduction, and NOx at the tune of 51, 52%. I mean, that's a great resume. There's no other port. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. There is no other port complex in the country that even comes close to those metrics. Right?
Right on.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm not saying something Dr. Jack kind of disproves, because this guy is the authority here. Anyway, so with that, I was hoping that when I was invited, Sandy, and thank you for the kind invitation, I thought, man, I'm going to go on the cruise on the Winston, Sir Winston, I'm sorry. So that way people could see that when you go through the port complex, you don't see it in the days of old, container ships emitting black smoke.
Right.
You don't see that anymore. You don't see black trucks. You don't see trucks emitting black smoke throughout the complex. Those are days of old. Now, have we accomplished our objective? Absolutely not. Our objective is zero emission. So to do this, we continue with our plan of action in terms of electrification. Now, for the city of Long Beach, that's good news, because the more you use electricity, the utility users tax is very good for the city. So, but we have a very pragmatic approach on how we move forward to do this in a way that we don't lose jobs here, because that's very important for the Port of Long Beach. So we move forward with a myriad of demonstration projects, thanks for the funding that we received at the federal level, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, in terms of the funding that's coming from the federal level. At the state level, as you know, Governor Newsom has allocated $2.1 billion to goods movement, ports, and more specifically for ports, about $1.2 billion. So the funding is coming in to help us with the challenge of getting to zero emission. Because by the way, when we announced this goal in 2017, to accomplish that goal, it was estimated we needed somewhere between $12 and $14 billion to do this. That is transition cargo handling equipment to zero, and the 20,000 trucks that are on the registry to be zero emission. And we set the goal for 2035 for trucks and 2030 for equipment. Now, as we move forward with this endeavor of sustainability, there was questions about, okay, so what is actually the fuel of the future? And a lot of questions about EV trucks and EV cars. So if you go back maybe 5 years, we were beginning to enter an era where people were going to be driving EV cars. And now the percentile, particularly in California, has really elevated. Because if you look back even a couple years ago, only 3% of the people in the US had electric EV cars. Most of that was in California. That percentile now is elevating thanks to the policies of the current administration, and of course what we continue with the tax incentives for people to buy into the EV vehicles. But the challenge for ports is that battery is a little bit more complicated when you talk about a heavy duty truck towing a container. That's a much different dynamic. So we said we at the Port of Long Beach, we said, okay, we need to transition to LNG renewable. That will substantially reduce emissions, and then move forward to EV, electric, but ultimately hydrogen. And it is very surprising to me, and in fact gratifying, that in the last couple of years, the state of California and the federal government have really moved the needle with regard to the need for hydrogen fuel infrastructure and moving towards green hydrogen. I remember I first met Jack a couple of years ago at a CP conference up in Berkeley, and I was really awed by his presentation with regard, are we really moving quickly with hydrogen? And the answer is yes. So, right now we're part of an Arches. We're part of Arches. It's an alliance, really out of GoBiz, the governor's office. It's an alliance, and we were the first port to join that alliance, and we were anxious to do that, in which we're going to partner as a state of California to try to be a beneficiary of what's out there at the federal level, $8 billion of funding for hydrogen hubs. We expect that we are maybe in line, if our application is successful as a state, to garner about 1.2 billion out of that. I mean, cross your fingers, that's the best scenario for us. But be that what it may, we are positioning ourselves to really be a mover and a player with regard to the hydrogen dynamic here in the state of California. So I want to thank the UC system, the state of California, the governor's office, GoBiz, and ARCHES and California Energy Commission, a lot of alliances here that have made this come to be. So those of you who may wonder about how much time I have. 20 minutes, man? Oh. Sandy, don't be afraid to do what my wife does. My wife does this. She was in the audience, I look at her, she'd be. So anyway, just do that, okay? So anyway, but here's the exciting news that we just announced in January. In January, I give the State of the Port speech every year. The tradition has been the Executive Director of Port Long Beach, January of each year, presents the State of the Port. So, as we're preparing for January 2023, in late fall of 2022, I told the staff, at this year's State of the Port, I'm going to focus on the environment and what we've done. I'm going to tell our story. I'm going to show our resume and show what we're doing for the future. I'm not going to talk about cargo volume. Not that I was being self-serving because we were losing volume, but I said that last year at the State of the Port when we had a record year. So this year's State of the Port, and those of you who may not have heard it, ordinarily I don't tell people to come and listen to me speak, but this State of the Port is a unique one because I just focus on the environmental progress that the Port of Long Beach has done. And in the end, I announce our next grander endeavor, Pier W, which is Pier Win. And how that came about is the state of California in the grand goal of meeting 100% renewable energy and focusing on wind, because we all know that solar has been in place. That's working fine, but solar isn't going to do it alone. We need a combination of wind and solar to focus on 100% renewable energy to make sure that we make a difference. So the state of California has a plan of action to focus again on how we get to the 5 gigawatt goal on the short term. I'm talking about 7 years from now. And of course on the long term, 25 gigawatts. So we're a part of a partnership that the Port of Long Beach has to offer a deep water port. We have the experience of building built projects, whether it's a state-of-the-art bridge or a state-of-the-art terminal. And now we're going to roll the dice and take on Pier Wind so that we could now assemble and stage wind turbines that will be as tall as 1,000 feet. Now, to put this in perspective, the Eiffel Tower is 800 feet. So imagine the challenge that we're going to have here. We really deliberated a lot on this, and we thought, you know what, we're a container port. Should we really get into this business? It's a very costly proposition. But to our resume, or to our DNA, one thing that distinguishes the Port of Long Beach, in my mind, from other ports is what we do in the caption of environmental social governance. We don't just move cargo here. We try to move it at the state-of-the-art sustainable development, whatever that is. So today, there's a big need for renewable energy, and for a port that has focused on electrification, it's a benefit to us on how we get the state of California to get to that 100% renewable goal, 100% renewable energy goal. So Pier Wind, we're going to allocate about 1,200 acres. 800 of that is in the water component, and we will have about 400 acres as a land component for these turbines. So essentially, all this is behind the federal breakwater, which is the calm water portion of the coast here. It's ideal for an assembly and integrating these wind turbines. And then again, work with Central California and Northern California in terms of how we move these turbines up and down the coast. So it's a very exciting endeavor for us. We're hoping that we're going to receive some funding from the California Energy Commission. There's about considerable money out there it's not going to pay for the project, but in conjunction with the federal funding that's out there, but more important, the private sector interest in this project is huge. I mean, we've already got phone calls from global companies who have done this in other parts of the world who are very interested in working with us to make this happen. The last thing about Pure W that I will say, it's going to be unique for the United States in this vein, or on this note. We have wind energy off the East Coast, so it's nothing new to have turbines off the shore, whether it's off Virginia, but keep in mind that in the East Coast, you're dealing with depth that's not the deep water depth that we have here. So it's more challenging to have this off the coast of California. However, what has evolved now is the turbine platform technology. The wind technology, where by way of a platform technology, you have these floating turbines. And that's going to be, again, a game changer here for us, a game changer for the state of California. But it's another example of how the Port of Long Beach, we will take advantage of whatever new technology is out there to provide the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish. That is, reducing emissions, reducing our dependency of fossil fuel, and of course, hoping to continue the green port, whether it's embracing wind energy, embracing green hydrogen. And I think what you're going to hear this evening is a panel who's really going to have their expertise here to really show how far this track, the train has left the station, so to speak, but how far this train is going down the track with regard to our quest for more friendlier environmental fuels. You'll have representatives here from Southern California Gas. You know, Southern California Gas has our Angeles Link project as one answer to the hydrogen infrastructure that we need. There are others, but I look forward to working with Southern California Edison with regard to the various projects that we need, particularly in terms of things that have to be addressed for Pure W to really come into play. So with that, I think I've covered all the bases I wanted to say this afternoon without taking too much time. But I got 4 minutes. So what do I say in 4 minutes? Okay, so I will say this, that when I took this position in 2017, if you heard Victor, when I arrived in Washington, by the time I went through the background information and waiting for Senate confirmation, it took a long time. And I think they were calling all my friends, like Roberto Randa, FBI is asking, hey, tell us more about this guy. Is there anything dirty about him? So I was crossing my fingers, But anyway, on a more serious note, I made it to the goal line. I finally got confirmed by the Senate. And then, of course, I got reconfirmed by the Senate during the time I was there. And then in 2016 of November, there was an election that changed the dynamic. And then, fortunately, there was an opportunity to come home to Long Beach. And lo and behold, there was a job opportunity here. I never went to Washington thinking, you know what, I'm going to come back and be the executive director of Port Long Beach. That was not the plan. So when President Trump deported me, I came back to Long Beach and I ended up in this position. But I think one of the mandates is to really take off where the Greenport policy evolved and our quest to be the continued environmental steward. And now, like I said, it's not only about reducing emissions, about going to zero. Now, I will say we didn't do this alone. I always thank community advocates that went to the city council talking about the emissions from the port. But I will say, for those who have that advocacy today, this port complex does not look like what it did in 2003. Much improved, and I want to thank the council people who also kind of twisted our arm to do something. People not only like Roberto Uranda, but the former city councilwoman, Doña Uranda, very much in the background, moving for sustainable development and for the port to do the right thing about reducing emissions. So for now, as I conclude, I think I have 1 more minute. I will say this. I'm very excited about the future. It's going to be a tough task. it's not going to be easy. We're not going to be zero emission anytime soon. But on the other hand, if you look to what we've done since 2005 to 2022, that was the last air inventory, which by the way, did spike because of the coastal, the vessels we had off the coast. But very good news with the carrier industry. A lot of them are moving to LNG. There's also green ammonia, hydrogen in the future, methanol in the near future in terms of these vessel owners that are going to have substantial difference in the emissions that these international carriers produce here. So give us 7 more years to really accomplish some positive metrics in terms of significant reductions and going towards zero emission. But in the meantime, appreciate all your support, because at the end of the day, as people know me here, I'm a big advocate for ports, and it is part of our economic engine for the state of California. You've all heard that the state of California now prides itself to be the 4th largest economy in the world. I mean, think about that, the 4th largest economy in the world. We passed up Germany last year. And so what other state in the United States could say that? They could talk about California, people leaving, business leaving, and all the drama you see in the headlines in the newspapers. The fact is, we are the 4th largest economy in the world. Now, is it all because of Silicon Valley? Well, I don't know about it lately, but certainly that could have been a factor. But my argument is international trade. The 11 ports of the state of California have a big factor as to why we're the 4th largest economy. And better news ahead, because not only are we going to be the 4th largest economy, but we're going to lead the world in terms of how we get to zero emission here in the state of California. So to this panel, thank you so much for your expertise that you're bringing. And I certainly want to learn from you, because again, we're all motivated to accomplish the right thing. So with that saying, did I make it to the...
You did.
All right, good. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Kimberly Caballero, and I'm the External Relations Manager for California.